Welcome to Beyond the Pulpit, exploring the life and ministry of Walnut Creek Church downtown. Walnut Creek Church exists to glorify God by making authentic disciples of Jesus Christ who love and worship Him in all they do. Well, all right, welcome to Beyond the Pulpit. My name is Derek Wadley, and I'm joined here by Luke Hookey.
Hey, everybody.
And Dan Rude.
Good morning, y'all.
And for the last few weeks at church, we've been looking at Genesis chapters 29 and 30. We see the life of Jacob, where he gets married to a couple of different women, and they start to have babies, and there's some concubines or slaves involved in all of these things. And this is an interesting passage because people will look at it and be like, see, Jacob, the man who became Israel, a man of God, he had multiple wives, and therefore polygamy is like part of God's intent, or He's okay with it. He's unbothered by a man having multiple wives. But that only holds water until you look at the story and see how disastrous everything gets.
Yeah, it only works until you read the story.
That's right. That's right.
And many other ones.
You can't look at the details, and so. There's a lot of problems that come with polygamy, and so we thought that what we would do is actually look at how the Bible, from beginning to end, has told the story of marriage being monogamous between one man and one woman for one lifetime. And so there are 5 ways that the Bible speaks against polygamy by telling the story of monogamy. So we thought we'd look at those here this morning. So number 1, what is it, Dan?
God's design in the garden is for one man and one woman. Mm-hmm. God's design in the garden is for marriage to be between one man and one woman. So we see in Genesis chapter 2, and the story is pretty incredible that God creates Adam. Well, He creates paradise. He creates everything. He creates paradise. He creates the man, and He says it's not good for the man to be alone. Mm-hmm. And so He's going to make a helper who's just right for him. And so God has Adam go to sleep, take a little nap, and then He takes Adam's rib and brings Eve, or creates Eve out of the rib and brings him to the man. And so the first words that we see that Adam speaks when it comes to, since Eve is created, the first thing that Adam says when he sees Eve is that he sings a love song. Mm-hmm. And he loves her from the moment he met her. And verse 23, it says, "And the man said, 'This one at last is bone of my bone and flesh of my flesh. This one will be called woman, for she was taken from man. This is why a man leaves his father and mother and bonds with his wife, and they become one flesh.'" So in the Garden of Eden, God's design was not to keep giving Adam wives or to keep giving Eve husbands. That's not the design. Nope. The design is Adam, Eve, united together in marriage. And then it says, "This is why a man leaves his father." So now they're looking towards the future and saying, this is why a man leaves his father and mother and bonds with his wife, and they become one flesh. So in the future, what does it look like? It looks like one man and one woman bonding together
for one lifetime.
For one lifetime. So this is the picture that we get back in the Garden of Eden. And so I'd say that's the first picture we see of marriage is God's design. Mm-hmm. Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden. One man, one woman, one lifetime. Pretty awesome.
Yeah. And it seems like if God, clearly, if He meant for something different, you would see that established here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
totally.
And you can only leave your parents once.
Yeah.
I mean, if you circle back, that seems like somewhere sideways.
Who is Adam's parents?
Yeah,
it's true. Yeah.
So it sets out the template. Yep. Moving forward, that humanity is the human race is to be one man, one woman, one lifetime. So that's the first way. Yeah. The second way the Bible points to monogamy in marriage is through the stories in the Old Testament of polygamy. Many people, they read the Old Testament and they say, well, look at all the polygamy in the Old Testament. I mean, and these were genuine worshipers of God. Yep. Abraham, Isaac, Isaac only has one wife. He learns the lesson to have one wife.
That's right.
And then Jacob, you think Jacob is going to learn the lesson from his dad, Isaac, but he doesn't. Mm-hmm. And he has multiple wives plus concubines, and that really confuses the picture. And then you keep reading the Bible and you see so many people have multiple wives. So many people have multiple wives.
Yeah, I mean, King David.
Solomon.
He set the record. Feels like the record.
Solomon's kind of like he's like at the top there.
What is it? There's like a bump in the curve.
Yeah, he's
like
like
bringing the average up.
wives, 700
That's right.
concubines. Holy cow!
Yeah. He did not even know all the names of his wives, probably.
Or his kids.
Or his children. I mean, it is a crazy, crazy picture. I mean, he would be celebrating a birthday of one of his wives 3 times a day.
Yeah.
That's right. Yep.
What? That's a very strange picture.
Good thing he was wealthy.
Yeah. But what you see in the Bible, now, if people read the Bible, the Old Testament, and they say, well, look, the people of God who are genuine worshipers of God had multiple wives, and God appears to be okay with it. Therefore, it's okay for people today to have multiple wives, because God, it's consistent with God's design or God's pattern, or at least it's consistent with the Scriptures. And there are people who make that argument. Joseph Smith made that argument.
The way that came about with Joseph Smith is just so interesting, because it's like it seemed like the established understanding of the early Mormons was like monogamy, and they were like, "Hey, Joseph, we noticed something about you.
Yeah,
you've got a lot of wives.
You got a lot of what's up with that. I think he had 46
on?
or something like that.
He's like
46 wives.
Did I not tell you about the vision the Lord gave me?
I know
that only I can have.
I know,
but.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy. And then Brigham Young, and I mean, the story gets crazy. But there are people today. There's a guy on TikTok. I'm not on TikTok, but I heard about this guy on TikTok. He's a pastor in Missouri who has multiple wives, and he goes around preaching his message of multiple wives.
Well, actually, there's an uptick again of like justifying polygamy, and that I feel like this happens every so often. But with even the culture of where we're at as far as marriage and love and all these things, it's the natural progression is just to justify polygamy.
Totally.
There's there's been so many like documentaries come out about thruples.
Just I know.
Like this whole idea, and it's almost never like, it's always like one man just collecting women.
Yeah,
it's like almost
generally
never,
the case.
Generally, it's almost never the inverse. But
yeah, it's pretty messed up. And so, how do you respond to the person who says polygamy is in the Bible?
Yeah, don't you see?
It's in the Bible, and God used it.
Yep.
Okay, what's the argument against that? Well, I think it's just you should read the stories.
Yeah. Well, not only
God
that,
uses a lot of very terrible situations to work out good.
Well, and that just because something's in the Bible doesn't mean God is condoning it or affirming it as good and true. It's like there's many things that God uses in the Bible that are not, in a sense, right. They're not good. They're like polygamy, for example, marriage here. It's like just because the nation of Israel is birthed out of it doesn't mean God is saying you should all have multiple wives.
Right.
He's not affirming it.
Yeah, it's a violation of God's design.
Yeah, and so the Bible is full of stories and full of details of things that are wrong.
Mm-hmm.
Totally, because it's a human experience.
Well, and it's good because the Word of God is not being sanitized.
Certainly.
And God has not sanitized life. And we just see openly, okay, here it is, and then you look at the effects of it, and it's devastating.
Totally devastating. And in many ways, if God just said, okay, you can't have multiple wives, you just can't have multiple wives, which he appears to say. I mean, that's a violation of God's design. Mm-hmm. And then people would always say, well, maybe it's going to turn out okay. Maybe we can. And but the Bible gives us a history lesson of what happens when people take multiple wives. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And it's just chaos upon devastation.
Families are torn apart.
Yeah, I think it would be tricky. I've thought about this before, and I've probably not thought about this enough, but I've thought about this before. Like, I think it would be way more difficult to understand if Jacob takes 4 wives. He has children with 4 women living in his house, and it's just a story of like harmony and peace and love and unity and grace and blessing, and that's all it was.
Works out.
And if those were the stories of the Bible, I do think it would be harder to argue against polygamy. I do. Mm-hmm. But the fact that every time, like, there's not one positive story in the Bible that lifts up polygamy. Every single time, people have multiple wives, it is destruction. And it's not, I'm not trying to say that it's because, more women, more problems. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying it's a violation of God's design.
Right.
And therefore, it's going to lead to chaos. And it does every single time.
Every violation of God's design for the world, the way it should operate, will always lead to death, and it will lead to chaos. And
Totally.
It will lead to destruction.
Now, God is gracious, so he will work through our chaos. But it would be wrong. The story of Joseph. Joseph makes his way to Egypt because of first, they his brothers sell him into slavery, and then it's slavery that gets him to that point, and then people lie about him and forget him, and and then he's falsely accused of rape. But then God uses that to actually elevate Joseph to the highest place in Egypt. And so the wrong conclusion would be to say, well, if look how God worked through slavery, and it turned out really good.
Yeah, we should.
And so therefore slavery is like legitimate.
It's good.
It's like, no. That's the wrong lesson. It's the wrong lesson.
Yeah.
The lesson is that God is so gracious that he works through human rebellion to bring about good. What you meant for evil, God meant for good.
It's the difference between good exegesis, reading the meaning of the text, versus eisegesis, reading your own meaning into the text.
That's right. And so how does the Bible speak against polygamy and affirm monogamy throughout the scriptures? One is it's seen in the garden by design. Second is through the stories of the Old Testament. The stories show the destructive nature of polygamy. Third is God's command to kings. This is kind of interesting. God's command to kings. Do you have Deuteronomy in front of you?
Yep.
There, Deuteronomy 17:17.
Yeah, I'll start a little bit back here. He says, when you enter the land the Lord your God is giving you, take possession of it and live in it, and say, I will set a king over me like all the nations around me. You are to appoint over you the king the Lord your God chooses. Appoint a king from your brothers. You are not to set a foreigner over you, or one who is not of your people. However, he must not require many horses for himself, or send the people back to Egypt to acquire many horses. For the Lord has told you, you are never to go back that way again. He must not acquire many wives for himself, so that his heart won't go astray. He must not acquire very large amounts of silver for himself, or gold for himself. And so he goes on and gives some other instructions to the king. But one of those is that he's very clear. He must not acquire many wives for himself, so that his heart won't go astray.
Totally.
So, yeah, I mean, you see that the highest kind of person in the land of Israel, the king, is not to be doing this.
Certainly.
It's not to be marrying many wives.
Which was totally different than what all the kings of the
else.
surrounding nations did. Totally different.
Yep.
And so part of the way Israel was to be holy was that the kings were to have one wife.
Yep.
Not multiple, one. And because of the rebellion of the human heart, the kings of Israel had many wives, and it destroyed them.
And you say, well, why doesn't God say that about, every man shouldn't have many wives? Well, if it starts at the top with the king, it's going to work its way down through the law of the land.
Certainly.
And so you say to the king, you shall not have many wives. And what happens is the rest of the land, men should not have many wives. They should have one wife.
King is to be the standard bearer of God's word and God's law.
Yep. In fact, in verse 18, when he is seated on his royal throne, he is to write a copy of this instruction for himself on a scroll in the presence of the Levitical priest. It's to remain with him, and he is to read from it all the days of his life, so that he may learn to fear the Lord his God, to observe all the words of his instruction, and to do these statutes. Like he's to take these instructions, write them down, and every day remind himself of what God has called him to do. Yep. And that was the way, in one sense, which God was going to keep his nation set apart and holy from the rest of the world.
Yep. I mean, the kings didn't listen, and it led to absolute chaos. It's that their hearts were led astray, and it divided the whole kingdom.
When you look at Solomon at the end of his life.
Certainly. Yep. That's exactly right. And so I would say that's the third way. How does the Bible affirm monogamy and speak against polygamy? Well, I think it's by the command that God gave to kings. Number 4 is the character qualifications for elders in the New Testament church. It's the character qualifications for elders in the New Testament church. And so one of the striking character requirements of pastors is that pastors are to be what's called a one-woman man. A one-woman man. So Paul, in 1 Timothy chapter 3, lays out the character requirements for elders. And I'll just read them quickly. In verse 2, it says, "An overseer, therefore, must be above reproach." And then it says, "The husband of one wife, self-controlled, sensible, respectable, hospitable, able to teach, not an excessive drinker, not a bully, but gentle, not quarrelsome, not greedy. He must manage his own household competently and have his children under control with all dignity." And so as he's laying out these character qualifications, you see the requirements of what those who lead the church, they are to be one-woman men. That's what they are. And I remember years ago reading this in high school, and it didn't make any sense to me.
Why would he need to say that?
Why would he ever need to say that elders are to be, to have one wife? And I'm like, I've been to church my whole life, and I've never seen anyone in the church who has multiple wives. In fact, I've never met anyone who has multiple wives. Like
you have without knowing.
Without knowing.
Without knowing,
maybe.
but,
At least as of high school. When I was in high school, I was like, what? Well, why would this ever be a thing? And I've never...
Wasn't much polygamy in J-Town.
I don't know. That's right.
That we're aware of.
It's not open. It's not open. Anyways,
yeah, exactly.
But, okay, so then over the years, I've done a little reading about this, a little research. And some people say, well, what this means is, like, if an elder has a wife and that wife dies, he can't remarry. I'm like, nope, that's not what it means. That's not what he's talking about. And then they're like, well, why else would it be here? And I'm like, well, because this was written
marrying multiple women.
This is written into the in the first century, in the non-Christian world to Timothy, who was in Ephesus, which was a pagan, godless society. And I've thought about this scenario, and I think this is, from what I've read, I don't want to say it happened like every time, but oftentimes when the gospel would go into the pagan world, people would become Christians and they have multiple wives. And could you imagine that? Like, you go out and you preach the gospel, and there's Ted, and Ted becomes a Christian.
Yep.
And he says, I want to worship God, and I want my children and my wives also to worship God. You're like, wait a second. Okay, how do we do this? So now Ted is coming, he joins the church in Ephesus, and he's coming with his 3 wives and his 12 children. What does the Bible say Ted is supposed to do if he's supposed to be a faithful Christian? What does he do? Which wife does he divorce? Which does he get rid of 2 of them? Now, but does he keep his? Have
you ever heard of casting lots?
I'm just thinking. Just think about this. So now Ted, he has 3 wives.
Yep.
He has 12 children. If he gets rid of 2 of his wives, now does he send his wives and his children out of the home?
I feel like this just became a math problem.
I know.
Yeah. Sorry, I tapped out.
My eyes are glazing over.
I know, but
we finished school.
This
guys,
this is kindergarten. This is less than kindergarten math.
I don't know
about that.
Okay, but what is he supposed to do? What does faithfulness to the Lord Jesus Christ look like? And this was not a one-time problem. This was a massive problem. I'm not saying that every person was a polygamist. That's not what I'm saying. But polygamy existed in the ancient world, and so this is the biblical instruction. What is faith, Ted? What does faithfulness to the Lord look like? I think you love your wives and your children.
Yeah,
you love your wives and your children.
You have to probably circle back to, like, if the unbelieving spouse then abandons or anything like that. But then it's just like Ted would then not be qualified to be an elder.
Yes. And so then what happens is, because he has multiple wives, he cannot serve in the office of the elder. So he could be faithful to the Lord, love his wives and his children, but he doesn't necessarily have to divorce his wives. And so that is such an interesting picture.
Now, to be clear here, because to make sure no one's misunderstanding what you're saying, this is when somebody is they're not a Christian,
correct,
married to multiple women and become a Christian.
That's correct.
Versus any of you out there who think that somehow what we're saying is if you are a Christian, you can go marry multiple wives, but just not be a pastor.
Yes,
it doesn't work. That's not work. Now, here, I do think this is important, is that the pattern of much of the world is polygamy.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, still today.
Today even. So even like our missionaries in other countries today, or if you talk to missionaries, they have to deal with, troubleshoot this real problem.
Certainly.
And so it's not, I think we live in a country that's been founded upon Christianity and monogamy primarily. And so our experience is essentially it's just monogamy. To the idea of polygamy seems like just a foreign thought to most people. Like it's something way, way, way back in ancient times, but it's actually not. It's
not.
all over the world today.
Oh, yeah.
And it's affirmed in many parts of the world
Oh,
today.
yeah.
And it definitely was back then.
Yeah, and our like you're talking about our missionaries. I was talking with one of them who was in town, and he said that where he's at in the world, he looks at these people that he's living among. They look at him, and he's a white American man, and he has one wife, and they cannot understand it because where he lives, the worldview that they have is that the dream of their land, of their culture, is to make enough money, and the moment you're able to make enough money, you get another wife, and then so it's like a status.
Yeah.
It's like a status thing. So like, how many wives can you take care of?
Yeah.
And the more you have, the more awesome you
That's
are.
exactly right. And so that's like the dream. So like these young boys are growing up in a culture where
Do people hate their lives?
the dream is to have multiple wives, make enough money. And so they look at our men, and they're like, wait a second, you're a white American man, and you have enough money, but you only have one wife. And so they reach this conclusion that they're serious with them. They're like, are you afraid of women? Are you afraid of what's wrong with you?
Yep.
And so I just think it's such a crazy thought. That's the norm where they're at. And so the assumption of monogamy in our country, it flows from this requirement that elders have to be one-woman men, because the wisdom of the Bible says that Ted, who has 3 wives, who became a Christian after he had 3 wives and children, the logic of this requirement is that Ted, you can come and worship God and be faithful, but your children shouldn't be polygamists. Your children, if you're going to be raised in the church, the example to follow is the example of the elders. Just like you're talking about with the king.
Yep.
The king back in Israel. I'm not saying elders are kings, by the way, but I'm just saying the example.
But close. I mean,
no, I'm saying the example that is to be set.
Scratch that from
In the New
That
Testament.
Luke did not say that.
He did not. It was misunderstood. Okay. The example that the faithful New Testament church was to set is that the church is to be led by elders who have one wife, and then that would be passed down from one generation to the next, to the next, to the next, and then the church, the people of God, are to be the salt and light, and the culture would then influence the culture, and then the culture would embrace polygamy, or not polygamy, monogamy. Reject polygamy and embrace monogamy. And the reason for this is that monogamy tells the story of the gospel.
Mm-hmm.
Reason 5.
That's reason number 5, that monogamy tells the story of the gospel, because Christ, who is the head of the church, he is the bridegroom, and the church is the bride. That he's the husband, we're the wife. And he has one bride, one people. And so there's this relationship between the way the elders are to elder and the example and testimony of the church. And that's why husbands, you're to love your wives as Christ loved the church. And so husbands are acting that out with their singular
wife.
one wife.
Yep.
And elders are to preserve that requirement.
Yes.
In that example in the church, that the church might tell the right story, the story of the gospel.
And so what you find is the New Testament, Jesus and Paul and others actually affirm the what was actually started in the Garden of Eden.
Totally.
God's design, which is monogamy.
That's
One man,
exactly
one
right.
woman for one life.
That's right. And it not only goes back to the garden and affirms that standard in the garden, it also points our eyes ahead to the marriage supper of the Lamb, all the way back or not all the way back, but in the book of Revelation, the back of the book,
the other end of the book.
Yeah. And so the church today has, wherever the gospel goes, polygamy is done away with.
Yeah.
But this is so fascinating. In the New Testament, there are no clear commands against polygamy.
Yep.
Therefore,
it's so interesting. So how do you get rid of polygamy? You get rid of polygamy not by telling people don't be polygamists, but by preaching the good news of the gospel, and then churches being faithful to the word of God. And that, over time, gets rid of polygamy. It upholds monogamy. It upholds the standard of God's design all the way back in the garden. And it's because the New Testament gospel proclaiming church is designed to tell the story of the gospel.
Yes.
And so that's, I think that those would be 5 ways. We could probably come up with another 5 or 10 ways that the Bible rejects polygamy and upholds monogamy as the standard.